Good afternoon and welcome to our closing plenary. This last session, we're going to talk about synergy and showcase the work of Native CDFIs, coalitions, and networks. I'd like to introduce our panelists for this session. We have Amber Schultz Oliver. She's the Executive Director of the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians Economic Development Corporation. We also have Lakota Vogel, the Executive Director of Four Bands Community Fund. We have Becky Albert Breed, who is the Executive Director of First Nations Community Financial, and also the Vice Chairwoman of the Wisconsin Indigenous Economic Development Corp. We also originally had Tawny Brunch scheduled. Unfortunately, she had an unexpected emergency, and Joanna Donahoe has graciously joined us to represent the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition. She's a partner with Seven Sisters Community Development, LLC, and serves as a co-facilitator with the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition. So thank you so much, ladies, for joining us today with this fantastic discussion about your coalitions and networks. We're really going to take it away with a nice conversation and ask a few questions and showcase your coalitions and networks. I wanted to start with a question to each of you about telling us the history of your coalition and why it was created. And could we start off with Amber? Can you tell us about your coalitions?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Fern. So we started the Northwest Native Lending Network pretty soon after I got this position at ATNI EDC. And it was really formed because I'd never heard of a CDFI, and all of a sudden I found myself running one. And so I reached out to some of the other CDFIs within our network within the ATNI region. And really, I just got everybody in a room together with a really light agenda to just start talking about what some of our challenges are, what some of our opportunities are, and how we might be able to work better together. And from that meeting, we started kind of taking some notes of how we could support each other's work. And we walked away with 3 overarching goals. And I'll just read those out really quickly. The first one is to support lending institutions that serve Indian country, to pool and share technical assistance and financial resources, create tools and systems to facilitate lending in Indian country, demonstrate the value of CDFIs, and strengthen key relationships. And this is I don't think I talked about really where the Northwest Native Lending Network is. Part of its name is up in the Pacific Northwest. I kind of formed it using the region that I serve, the ATNI region, which includes Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, and some other surrounding states as well. And so, yeah, so it turns out that there was a there, and in 2019, we formally formed the Northwest Native Lending Network. It's not really its own organization right now. It's more of a program that lives under ATNI EDC.
Fantastic, Amber. I'd like to go on to Lakota, if you'd like to tell us about your coalition's history and why you formed.
Sure, it's exciting to kind of hear how we all emerged. So currently today I represent the Mountain Plains Regional Native CDFI Coalition. So who's leading that coalition and sort of how we lead, I can talk about quickly. We have 9 Native CDFIs as members of our coalition. They include CDFIs within South Dakota, Montana, and Wyoming. We are including North Dakota because part of Standing Rock, is within South Dakota. And so we would love to expand to North Dakota, but currently don't have any participating Native CDFIs right now. But there are 9 of us, and some of them are probably on the call. I can't see you, but hey. Within the group, there's women fill 72% of the leadership roles within this coalition, which we think is pretty powerful. In traditional finance, men usually hold 73% of the leadership positions. So 7 out of the 9 leaders are Native women, and 59, which is representative of our populations that we serve, because 59% of the loan recipients that we serve are women. So really, we wanted to emerge as a replicable regional model that serves a pretty large geographic landscape. we wanted to become an engaged ecosystem across those 4 states that's actively doing systems change work. So we've been meeting biweekly since about February of 2020. We were born from our desire to scale our solutions across the region just to change the opportunity trajectory of our communities. So we really start with relationships and partnerships, knowing that people are what comprise the economies that we serve, not transactions. And it's not really like what we're doing that's important. It's about how we're doing it. We've all sat down and did a strategic plan, and we started with our values and ensured that all of us brought the same values. And we're engaging an ecosystem that includes a lot of philanthropic institutionals, or regional banks, and some engaged impact investors in our region. So we host quarterly funder calls and have over, last time we had over 60 participants from various groups, and we meet quarterly. That's us as thought partners, and we really center those most impacted, which is the Native leaders in the conversation. But then we meet weekly or biweekly or twice a week, actually, as peers to sort of drive collective solutions. And the whole goal is for us to invest long-term in the region and see some systems change. So that's a little overview of the Mountain Plains Regional Coalition.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that, Lakota. I also did forget to mention, if anyone has questions during the session, please put them in the chat, and we are going to afford some time at the end to answer those questions as they come up. Becky, could you please tell us about the coalition and how it formed and why it was created?
All right, thank you, Fern. And so I'm here to represent what began as Wisconsin Indian Business Alliance, and this was also a coalition of CDFIs here in Wisconsin. There are 4 separate CDFIs that joined, and I know that informally the discussion started way back into 2014, and then since then it's just gotten stronger and cohesive. The other 3 Native CDFIs, I represent the Executive Director of First Nations Community Financial. And then there's 3 other ones that are First American Capital Corp, and they are based out of Milwaukee, sorry. And that's Gary Maher. And then we have Pam Boyden, and she is the head of Niji Capital and based up by the Menominee Reservation. And then we have Wisconsin Native Loan Fund, and currently that's Jeff Johnson overseeing that organization. Previously, Fern Ori filled that position. And so really there was a lot of years of work. I joined as an ED in 2017, and they were already worked really hard on putting together strategic planning, doing some things to really bind the group. But I am really excited to say that as of February of this year, 2022, we have formally created an entity over the 4 Native CDFIs. We did make a decision to transition from what was WEBA into a new entity just because of the powerful work that we're doing. We just believed that there was a better name, and Wisconsin Indigenous Economic Development Corp is now the new name. And we're really excited for the future to see what all that we can do and the greater impacts that we can have throughout the state. And much of the work that we do, our concept really is focused on being a bigger voice, making sure that we're heard on a higher level. I mean, we're small and mom and pop shops, but combined, when you combine all the work that we do, all the impacts we make in the communities, it really rises our voice to where we can start making some impacts even at the state legislative level with bills and advocacy. So we're excited to continue. We expect some really great things into the future. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Becky. And of course, I'm super excited to know that we're talking about these wonderful things in Wisconsin. Joanna, could you tell us about South Dakota?
Awesome, thanks, Fern. So the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition first came about back in 2013. So next year will be our 10-year anniversary. And it was first conceived by Elsie Meeks. Many of you guys may know Elsie. She was the first Native state director for rural development nationally, and she was in South Dakota. And when she first was appointed, she got together with her staff and said, let's talk about 502 loans on Indian reservations. And they're like, oh, that'll be a short discussion. And so she called together some key partners, the State Housing Finance Agency, South Dakota Housing Development Authority, of course, all the Native CDFIs, some state agencies, South Dakota Tribal Relations, and all got together in peer to talk about like how to work collectively. Of course, in addition to the CDFIs, the tribally designated housing entities, all got together collectively to talk about how to improve homeownership opportunities for Native families. And kind of universally, everyone said, yes, let's work together. There's a lot we can do with collaborations between stakeholders, and started at the end of 2013 with a strategic planning session and came out with a mission. The mission of the coalition is to increase homeownership opportunities for South Dakota's Native people to build strong and healthy communities. And until recently, the coalition was informal. It was guided by an informal steering committee, and Lakota Funds, where Tani is the executive director, served as the fiscal agent, and it still serves as the fiscal agent. But what's new is that the coalition itself is transitioning in to be its separate nonprofit. So Lakota Funds received an ANA SEDS grant, Social Economic Development Strategies grant, to create this and stand up this new nonprofit. So there's dedicated staff, and just became incorporated, and just earlier this month seated the first board, of which Lakota is a member of that board. So it's exciting to see the growth of the organization over the past 9 years so far.
Thank you, Joanna. That is absolutely exciting for sure. All of the organizations creating a movement actually of organizing and growing and collaborating. I would like to go into the next question around, tell us some of the successes and impacts that your networks and coalitions have achieved. And let's start with Lakota this time.
I appreciate the word you said with movement. I really think that a lot of us believe in that. And truthfully, that's kind of where we're still at with the Mountain Plains Regional Native CDFI Coalition. We aren't formalized. We've sort of been subversive again with what coalitions can look like, and sort of fought the idea of formalization, knowing we want to just address concerns and keep it grassrootsy, right? And so we still feel like a movement. And the big thing, one of our biggest successes is really always focusing on systems change. Our target market really is organizations and systems above us. Like CDFIs already serve our clients really well. Like there's things that we can do to address that and streamline processes amongst the 9 Native CDFIs participating. I can share best practices and my colleagues can choose to adopt them or not, and same. But the whole point is to sort of look upwards into the industry and the systems and start saying, we really need to intentionally and strategically cultivate not only the intellectual capital required for this vibrant regional Indigenous finance industry, but we're really looking to talk about how to get move money from white-led institutions into Native-led institutions, right? So some of the biggest things that we've been able to achieve is getting Wells Fargo Open for Business Fund capital into the region and push it out in a model that is still informal, where the person with the capacity, I just had the ability to apply for that on behalf of the region, which I did. And then maybe the next time an opportunity comes up, NADC will apply for that, like they have through the Administration for Native Americans grant, right? And it doesn't depend on who holds those funds. It's a reciprocal leadership strategy of sharing. So the biggest thing that we went after is EDA's Build Back Better phase 1 opportunity. So we made it to phase 1, received the $500,000 grants, and it's really going to be moving a few things. We're going to develop a regional growth plan. We're going to work on some workforce development at the CDFI level, as well as modeling that back down to our clients. One thing that we're really excited about is proposing something like a CDC, we're not sure yet, but we know Native CDFIs have been asking for shared health insurance, right? If we could all pool our health insurance together as CDFIs, we could offer better benefits to our employees. So we want to create a platform for the region and hopefully replicable to the rest of the industry as a model of ways to make things more efficient and to pool resources. So even like an IT company, if all of us could share an IT company, we wouldn't each individually have to vet an IT company, right? But they would get our system. So we haven't figured it all out yet, but that's in the proposal to EDA. And we're hoping it'll reduce the inefficiencies of our organizations, and it'll allow us to focus more on community services and lending and what we do best, right? And then one of the bigger projects within this EDA is for the Crow reservation over with Charlene to build the Crow Innovation Center, which is an incubator. And so in doing that at Crow, we can all then take what Charlene learns and replicate it across the region. Then I don't have to go out and learn what it costs per square foot to put in a restaurant, et cetera, right? So the whole point is to replicate what each one of us does within that space. And then the last is actually requesting $22 million for a regional revolving loan fund. EDA has historically held a revolving loan fund product. It hasn't historically made it into Native communities very well. We're hoping in this moment in history to be able to help them help themselves, refine their ways of doing things a little like we did in the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition with USDA and 502, but kind of keep pulling on these federal entities and the levers that are available to us to say, hey, guess what? If you could change this one thing in your policy, money could make it into Native communities so much quicker and faster. So that's the high level of things that we're hoping to do. They're not actual successes on paper, but just keep your fingers crossed for us, everybody. So
That's amazing, Lakota. And when are those announcements coming out?
they're telling us September. So
Fingers crossed all over
Yeah.
Indian country, right?
yeah.
Let's go to Amber. Let's talk about some successes and impacts with your coalition.
Yeah, great, thanks. So we were just starting to kind of embark on the strategic planning process to figure out what the bigger life of this coalition is right before the pandemic. And so we saw the opportunity during the pandemic to really just kind of use ourselves as almost like a support group. How do we support our borrowers while also supporting the health of our own organizations? What were some of the best practices? What were some of the tools and strategies that we were all using? So I think just having that touch point during a really confusing and volatile time was really, really huge for all of us. So I mean, that's the first thing that we can kind of point to in terms of the impact and that we could see that there is a big life and a need for this kind of a coalition. It's kind of worked out now, and I think that the pandemic did catalyze this. So we are meeting monthly. We have a standing meeting. People can come and go. We try and keep a pretty light agenda, mostly just allowing some kind of airtime for people to talk about what are some of the successes, what are some challenges, and then we're keeping a running notepad of maybe some guest speakers that we can invite to those meetings. We did have somebody join us from the, I know it's not called the BIA Loan Guarantee Program anymore, but that's what everyone calls it. So we did have somebody from BIA join us and talk about that program and answer some questions. And we even had a CDFI that was successfully using that program. So it's pretty informal. It's really more of a conversation. And part of the future things that we want to start exploring is, can we, like Lakota was saying, can we pool some of that back office support? Does it make sense for us all to have our own CPA, our own benefits package? We each need our own underwrite. Where can we pool some of this support, because we are such small, lean organizations, to be able to better support each other. So that's one of the conversations. We've talked about maybe doing a pooled capital fund, and other just best practices. One of the things that did come out of this network was we just did a loan officer training during the pandemic. A lot of us hired on a lot of new people, and just having that face time and that relationship building where our new employees can come in, meet their peers, and have somebody that they can call to ask questions to. It's just a really huge resource.
Oh my gosh, my unmute was not working. Yeah, those are all fantastic highlights, and especially I hear common themes through these coalitions and networks, right? Creating that synergy, not recreating the wheel, avoiding duplicative services, and having that hub. I love it. Let's go with Joanna. Let's talk about South Dakota on success and impacts.
All right, I've been taking notes from other coalitions. Like, there's so much good stuff out there. So when we talk to folks in the coalition, we try and measure our impact, and to look at what is the value proposition, because we charge dues. Our members pay dues, and so we want to be sure there's a value proposition. So some of the most common impacts we hear from people that they've found the most useful is really the networking and the peer sharing. To have a forum every year, we convene, with the exception of COVID, although we did this virtually, once in conjunction with the South Dakota Housing Development, or the Housing Conference, the South Dakota Housing Conference in the fall. And during June, during Homeownership Month, we go to a community, we go to a tribal community to learn about what they're doing to support homeownership, even if it's just a small thing. And just like everyone else, the tribes across the state in South Dakota are all very different. And so going and being there to learn what folks are doing and to see firsthand and kind of lift up their work has been really appreciated by the members of the coalition, not only just the tribes and the TDHEs and the Native CDFIs, but also the non-Native partners who are stakeholders in this space. We also have really focused on, when we first did came together, one of the biggest barriers to homeownership, of course, was homebuyer readiness. So we've invested a lot of time and effort into bringing training opportunities to build capacity on the local level. So bringing those instructor trainings to the state of South Dakota, and to build that cadre of trainers in the homebuyer education, financial coaching, and housing counseling space. We've also, Lakota alluded to this earlier, had some really good policy gains. We're still waiting for some big wins, but we really focused on the 502, and this is again kind of what birthed the coalition, is the 502, and looking at how 502 could partner more closely with Native CDFIs to deploy capital more efficiently, because Native CDFIs can do that well. That success with the pilot has been huge, and Lakota at Four Bands and Maziska, Colleen Steele and her team at Maziska have been able to deploy twice as many loans as USDA did on their own in the past 10 years. So through the pilot, they did twice as many loans in less than, it was like 18 months really, because they have the pipeline and everything. So that was a huge policy gain, and now we have legislation pending to make that pilot permanent and to expand it to the rest of Indian country. So Senator Rounds, our South Dakota senator, is teamed up with Senator Smith to introduce that legislation in the Senate. The other big policy effort that we have going on, and this is another success, just kind of organically coming out of our work together, is looking at how to improve homeownership opportunities for veterans, for Native veterans. And we created a dedicated Native homeownership, or Veterans Homeownership Committee, and so have had some really great successes in working with the VA, not only in the St. Paul region, but also nationally with the veterans, with the VA Native American Direct Loan Program. Senator Rounds did a request for a GAO report, and now there's getting ready to introduce legislation. So there's, on the policy front, that's been an area we have dedicated a lot of time and effort to. Two more quick things, Fern, I'll just add. A lot of folks got together during COVID and did, had all different types of efforts, but what the coalition saw was not only, two things. One is that a lot of the state and federal programs didn't get to tribes in the right way and just couldn't be accessed to tribes and Native people. And so the coalition got together and did a relief fund, not only for home buyers or homeowners, but also for small businesses, because those small businesses were really, local employers. And we felt like, that making sure that the small businesses were strong and throughout the pandemic and could survive was an important part of the economy that supports the homeownership market. And so that COVID relief package, I think, was a huge success. And then finally, this is more of an emerging success, is that the South Dakota Coalition is looking at creating a housing development subsidiary. And we're looking at, housing stock is a huge issue across Indian country, especially in South Dakota. So we're looking at, we have a committee dedicated to physical issues, looking at how do we train more inspectors, get more certified inspectors, more certified appraisers who understand how to do cost-based valuation. And we have a really successful construction internship program. And that's hopefully going to be expanding over the next couple of years. So, and then creating a housing development subsidiary from a trusted partner that can really help where the capacity is needed. Some of the housing authorities and some of the communities don't need this, but some do. So that's another area of focus.
That's fantastic. We were actually just talking about that a bit at the HUD Housing Counseling Network last week, and we are definitely filling voids and gaps throughout the country with all of these initiatives. It makes me think of if we're having this conversation in 5 years and to know the things that got done and things that are still working on. I love that. Becky, let's hear about Wisconsin on some success and impacts.
All right, thank you, Fern. So Wisconsin serves 11 different tribes throughout the state. And so there's a lot of needs, but there's also a lot of similar needs. So from tribe to tribe here, you'll see some of the housing is one of the greatest priorities, but we fight the inventory. So we have similar problems that we can work together and bring some solutions to the table that I think really you all spoke about through the networks. And Amber, I really could just say ditto to everything that you said. You took it all away from me. But honestly, it's really exciting. One of the things that I want to highlight is that we always create items and to show that what our impacts are throughout the state. And so if I just showed you First Nations Community Financial, it wouldn't look, and it probably wouldn't attract as many funders or legislators. But when you combine all of the work that we do, so in 2021, we deployed 3.5 million out there. And between the 4 organizations, we're able to cover business, housing, consumer loans. And so we kind of cover everything. But then yet we each differ in a little bit, depending upon what our underwriting is and how we created our products. So we have a referral system also. So if something comes on my plate and it's not quite a good fit, I can turn around and say to Niji Capital, hey, this is a really good fit for you, and refer them over there. So we're able to serve more people in that way and find a better fit. And we kind of help them so that they don't have to go to 4 different places to try to find what they need from one. Also, with those 11 tribes, since we have joined collaboratively, we have sent capital out of 27.9 million total to all of these tribes. So that's, to me, really impressive. When you put that out there, then you can attract people like the Wells Fargos or the Fannie Mae's, or where before, if you're a standalone, sometimes that can be a struggle. We also know how much of a struggle it is just from day to day managing our clients and our staff, and there's always not enough time to accomplish things. So that's one thing that I'm proud of, how our team really works together. We're able to get out to presentations, conferences, trainings, put trainings on. We have started doing collaborative training so if for some reason somebody here can't fulfill something, I can call up NCDFI Capital and they'll step in and say, okay, we can do the business class today. So it just really helps with the transition and of the products and getting the information out there. I just can't say enough about things such as policy when we're trying to be heard with policies at the state level. I mean, what's really impressive is that we received, I don't even know, Fern, if we know the number. I know it was maybe close to $5 million that was distributed from the state, just awarded this year to all of our CDFIs. And it really came to because we were combined, speaking out, saying how much there's a need throughout our Indigenous communities. And I don't know if that really would have happened if we hadn't been, working collaboratively to be heard at that level. So that's really exciting things. So the advocacy and then also even day-to-day things when you start talking about policies. Oweesta, I have to say, they are so wonderful of a resource for things like policy and things, underwriting, if you have questions, if you have needs. But then also I have my Wisconsin individuals that I can lean upon and reach out and say, I'm in need of, I'm having a problem with this promissory note. What do you guys use? And we do a lot of sharing so that we can get all of our work up to a higher level of standard and implement best practices. So we like to share and collaborate that way also. So again, ditto to a lot of the things that you all said, but I really think that it is one of the best choices that we made as an organization. So thank you.
Thank you, Becky. And yes, I'm smiling. I had to do the heart. And thanks for the comment, Denise. We are definitely passionate. I always say it's our occupation, or not our occupation, it's our occupation, especially when we've grown into these networks and coalitions that are really just, I use the word synergy because it's the best description in my mind, and really growing our spheres of influence by working together, especially policy, legislation, moving the needle, right? South Dakota's doing 502s that would have never been on the docket without that work in the pilot program. And all the other projects, and just really hitting the ground like gangbusters and getting things done and really showing what we can do when we work together. So you ladies are just knocking it out of the park. Let's go to the next set of questions. One that we always are interested in knowing is, tell us all about where your funding sources are coming from for these exciting projects. Let's start with Joanna.
Okay. So like many groups in their footprint, Northwest Area Foundation was the seed money for the coalition. It was the very first like $30,000 grant came from Northwest Area Foundation. And it was really interesting because, homeownership is not part of their giving area. And so we made the case to them that this is part of economic development, and our focus of, supporting professionals in the real estate construction industry was really, I think, what was interesting to them, and they've been a funder ever since. We also go with small, the South Dakota Community Foundation, obviously just small statewide coalition or funder, have been a long-term funder and supporter. Bush Foundation, another regional foundation. Enterprise Community Partners has been a huge supporter, not only in their support through Section 4, HUD Section 4 funds, but also dedicating staff and to be on our committees and being really involved. Until recently, Susan Anderson and also Dustin Baird. Wells Fargo has been very supportive. The State Housing Finance Agency, South Dakota Housing Development Authority, has supported the housing needs assessments. They have a match program, and they expanded their work to, they have this housing needs assessment program, and they, in partnering with the coalition, have implemented that in tribal communities. Our construction internship program that I mentioned earlier, City has been a big supporter of that. Also, the Johnson Scholarship Foundation. They traditionally support tribal colleges, and tribal colleges have been part of the internship program. But we also have fee income through our membership dues, and looking towards sustainability. We've had a couple of contracts with Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. They don't do grants, they do contracts. So that's been fee income. And really the board now is really stressing sustainability and looking at, where can we charge registration? Where can we charge, where do we have products that are worth paying for that can help to sustain the operations of the coalition? In fact, just increased the membership levels. The membership committee really took a unique approach. They kind of blended together the whole concept of doing sponsorships and membership dues. So some groups can do sponsorships, or it's easier for them to do membership. So we, instead of like asking for a $5,000 sponsorship for one event, we offer the opportunity to be a $5,000 member, pay $5,000 member dues. So really focused fundraising efforts on sustainability. So those are the big ones. I'm sure there are others that I left off, but that's where the funding for South Dakota has come from.
I love it. I'm sure we're all taking furious notes on some of these. Let's go to Becky. Let's talk about Wisconsin funding sources.
And feel free to jump in, Fern. Because I joined a little bit later, but what was when I first began, which I think was really instrumental, is a strategic partnership with Wisconsin Economic Development Corp. And it really has been a beneficial relationship. They are instrumental in Wisconsin. They used to be part of, from my understanding, the state, but then they separated to its own corporation with the same mission. And yet, so over the years, they have provided funding on an annual basis to WEBA to fulfill their goals, their mission. And so it's been a great relationship, collaboration, both from an event, conferences, getting our name out there to different individuals, and strategically bringing organizations together with us. And of course, from a funding position. I also know that they facilitated this moving on to the next step, where we just received that large funding that I'm talking about, as individuals and as a whole. So that was really big. One of the drivers that we did decide to make it formal is because we did run into issues with applying and for different funds or different grants, and they wouldn't accept us as an entity because we weren't formalized, so we weren't eligible. So I think that's one of the drivers for us to move from just one of us being a fiscal agent into being one collaboration and incorporated. We have applied for our 501c3, and we also had made a decision to become a CDC and a CHOTO, just because we're in the housing is probably the highest priority across the state with all of the tribes. So we know that looking forward, we want to be able to serve in both with the small business and into the housing market. But also, when I say small business, I shouldn't limit us to that, because one of the drivers was to join all together so that we can do bigger deals for the tribe. So we can do bigger deals within the communities that maybe one of us alone couldn't weather that risk. But now together as a whole, we're able to do some of those bigger projects. And so that's where we're just kind of looking forward and excited about what the future can bring. And we will continue to pursue other funding, and we've had a lot of private funders start reaching out and asking about who we are and what we do, and we expect partnerships to grow into funding positions there also. So excited for the future here.
Awesome, Becky. Yes, lots of, it's just like the seeds that we've been planting all this time are really starting to grow and come to fruition, along with all the other coalitions too, right? Let's go to Amber and talk about some of the funding sources you've accessed for your coalition network.
Yeah, so thanks for that question, Fern. I think starting out when it was just sort of an idea, I was able to justify, so we're also an economic development corporation. So we get money from the Economic Development Administration to create our comprehensive economic development strategy. And so I could make a case that this coalition lives under our SEDS. And so I was starting to use that as kind of the initial seed money. And that's really nice. It's a really nice flexible pot of funds, but we did want to find some more dedicated funds for the coalition itself. And I don't know if other CDFIs experienced this like we did, but you know, during the pandemic, we got a lot of just kind of money falling out of the sky for general operations and support. You know, we got it from Meyer Memorial Trust, Oregon Community Foundation, the Indian Collective, Oweesta Collaborative Grant. We got that, and so a lot of those funds really help support this work. And then I'm also happy to announce that we just got a grant from Northwest Area Foundation just for the Northwest Native Lending Network to support this work over the next year and to help us move forward on our strategic plan.
Congratulations, that's amazing. Let's go to Lakota and hear some more funding sources.
Yeah, we did a lot of car washes and bake sales, and like we didn't originally. We all kind of came together and, like you, Amber, kind of said, let's dip into our own pots of funding, call this a strategy of scaling and learning and executive leadership learning. So many of us for the first year and a half funded the facilitator. That was really the only cost for us convening virtually, was for us just to have these conversations and somebody to take notes and convene us. And so that cost was shared amongst each of us. We just kind of invoiced for it and paid the consultant that helped us. And then from there, it was about reaching out to different funders, but really developing relationships. And First Interstate Bank was one of the first that sort of said, sounds amazing. Kind of just gave us, each of us, $5,000 initially to keep this moving forward. And from there, it really has been a lot about those quarterly funder calls, but also just cultivating relationships. Like, I can't express how important that is with your funders. And fortunately, we did it all in a good timing so that we were able to come up with like 4.2 million in match for the EDA application in a matter of 28 days. Yeah, 4.3 million from our philanthropic partners. So we told them, guess what, guys, now's the time. We've been talking about it for 2 years. What can you put in the deal? And we were able to fundraise 4.3, and we've got about 5 to 6 million in the works right now, just in anticipation of receiving that award. But even some of it's not contingent upon receiving the EDA award. They just felt like we had, put the strategic plan in place and are ready to move forward. But I will say some folks are uncomfortable with us being an informal structure. It is odd. Not always the best way to go. If you have the ability to be patient and hold out, I guess, and if that's truly what the values of the coalition are, then we kind of stuck our ground there, and that's where we're at right now. I'm not saying it'll stay that way, because I'm sure EDA is going to require us to be formalized if we receive those funds. But as we get into the governance structure and who makes decisions, it really truly has been collaborative and reciprocal decision making. Majority rules, but I think if you can all include it in your strategic plan as individual organizations, the strength of our individual organization brings it into the collective, right? That's what all of the coalitions are talking about. And so if each of us can think like that in our individual organization, if you talk about the importance to your board about having a collective voice across the region and how that helps you and makes your organization stronger, you can add a little line item in there to support any sort of coalition events that you have going on. Because I mean, as a member of the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition, I'm so grateful for that, right? And I would pay anything to continue that coalition just for the sake of the work that they've done on the policy advocacy side, because we can't all be everything to everyone and be in all places at one time. So the more membership that you can spread your time across and ask your colleagues to share your story while you can't be at the event, you know, is really helpful. And I think that's truly the power of coalitions, which I've said before, but just wanted to say it again, ring that bell.
Wow, Lakota, that is amazing, especially that you got those funding sources without having that formal collaborative on paper yet, and just really speaks volumes to the work. Let's shift into the last question for everybody before we go into Q&A. Again, if anyone has questions, please send them in the chat. The last question I think is definitely super helpful to understand any advice you all may have for other regions or coalitions or networks that want to start and or enhance collective efforts. Any lessons learned, unforeseen obstacles, any unexpected outcomes, but basically any of the challenges or pitfalls to watch out for. Let's start with Amber this time.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we did that I recommend, and it sounds like Lakota's done the same thing, was getting a coordinator. So we hired somebody that's outside of our organization to just be a project manager that only does NNLN. So when that person contacts me, we're talking about NNLN, Northwest Native Lending Network. So I was trying to do it by myself. It really wasn't getting enough momentum because I kept skipping meetings, or I remember the meeting the day before, so there really wasn't any preparation. So my project manager takes notes, sets agendas, sends out meeting invites, sends out articles to the rest of the network that might be interesting to everybody. And it's just been huge for really growing the momentum of the network. So I mean, that's the first thing I have to say is hire somebody.
I can't agree with you more on that. How about Joanna? Let's talk about your challenges, obstacles, unexpected outcomes.
Well, first, I have to totally ditto what Amber said, because it's hard to do it unless you have someone on staff or, you know, outside entities coordinating things, so that to make sure that you have dedicated resources to run the coalition. It doesn't have to be a consultant. It can be someone on staff. I think that the other thing that was a challenge, two big challenges that we had to overcome. One is data collection. It's really, for those that know the Northwest Area Foundation, Martin Jennings is our program officer, and every meeting he was like, what's your impact? What can you tell me? What are you achieving? What's happening? And so we couldn't answer it. We couldn't answer that question. So we had to dedicate a lot of resources and time and energy to gathering, because with homeownership, right, like the tangible, there's lots of intangible impacts, but the tangible impacts are people in homes. And so we had to really create systems and create a data gathering process for that. So, and that took a lot of relationship building and helping to educate the practitioners that were doing the work, you know, looking at those metrics and helping them to understand how it fits into the big picture. And I think we've made a lot of headway in that. The other challenge is that this is kind of a long-term, you know, the barriers are big, right? Like it's a long game. All the historic disinvestment in Indian country around homeownership is huge, and they're long-standing barriers. So, but you know, the coalition really is playing the long game, meaning that, you know, housing stock, the professionals that we talked about earlier, building the local capacity of the CDFIs and the nonprofits, and you know, we're looking at funding appraiser like master's programs so that we can have more appraisers, and that's a 2-year thing, right? So that we can have more appraisers doing business on reservations. The other thing I think that was, I don't know if this was unexpected, but having a safe place where all the stakeholders could work together and feel comfortable asking questions of each other was huge. You know, when we do our gatherings now, it's like, you know, people, unlikely partners, people that you wouldn't expect to be buds are total buds now. And because they've been meeting together and really, you know, exploring ideas together and taking the time to dedicate to that relationship building and creating that that spirit of solidarity. And we're not talking just among the Native practitioners. We're also talking about the non-Native folks who, you know, want to do business in Indian country in a good way and want to feel comfortable asking questions that they don't understand, and also have the new staff at CDFI is feeling comfortable to ask questions like, you know, the stupid questions, so to speak. So I think the last thing I'll say, Fern, is that testing, like coming up with an idea and testing it, having the capacity where a couple groups could work together and try something new. And it may work, and it, you know, may turn into this successful pilot with, you know, the 502 relending, or it may not work. It may be like, oh, that didn't work, we're going to move on. So I think just having that ability to try things out collectively has been really helpful. And you know, I think a lot of coalitions, when they learn about us, they're like, wow, you have so many diverse stakeholders that are part of this process. How do you get them all together? And it is a lot of extra work, but it does really help to get things done in the state. So South Dakota is a small state, but it's a big state. I mean, it's a geographically huge. And so having, you know, COVID was a mix. I don't want to say it was a mixed blessing because there was no blessings with COVID, but the shift to being more virtual has really, in some ways, helped to bring people closer together because of this lovely Zoom screen. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, those are very real facts, you know, like I heard somebody say best pandemic ever, which is terribly weird, but somewhat true, especially in our industry. And it's changed the landscape on every level for good, bad, better, and different. Let's go with Becky and talk about some of the challenges, outcomes, etc.
Thanks, Fern. So some advice, just something different than because I do agree with everything that everybody said, is so we are focused on Wisconsin, and I know that some of the other ones go across state lines. For us, understanding what is the political landscape, what legislation is out there, what bills ultimately are going to help us and help the tribes and help our communities. So those are some of the things that we focus on to just kind of help in general. So that's one of the advices that I would have. Some of the other things that were some challenges, yes, I could hear that like administrative can be a challenge. We've been blessed with Kim Swisher, who has been with us since the inception, who really does those really, I mean, they don't seem like difficult things, but getting minutes, doing agendas, you know, setting those meetings, I mean, they do turn into big things when you're already each person is managing their own organization. To add some of those administrative things on top, it's just like, wait, which one, when, how, you know? And so she's been a godsend. And so she does a lot of that organizing and making sure that we're where we're supposed to be, and we're talking when we're supposed to be talking about what we're supposed to be talking about. So that is one really important, just to have that backup support. Another one, and this is going to come from my personal experience. So with any turnover, like at the top level of one of the members, so organizations. So 2014, if you all recall, is when kind of we started organizing, at that time, I was chairperson of the First Nations organization. I didn't switch to the ED until 2017. When I came in, it was already, you know, the engine was going, the train was on its way, and, you know, I missed the train. So I really struggled. I have to say I struggled with this concept because my experiences in business, in the casino, in the hospitality industry, it's cutthroat. Don't talk to any of your competitors because, you know, they'll take you out, they'll steal your ideas. And to move from that arena over to this arena where it's collaboration, it's cooperation, it's sharing, networking, you know, supporting, that type of thing was a whole new concept. So those members organizations kind of all have to be the synergy that Fern keeps speaking about. They have to all kind of be on the same page as to what is the mission, what is the goal, what is our understanding, where are we trying to get to? And coming in on that, when you weren't there at the start, so, you know, I struggled. I was like, I'm going to give a client away to another CDFI. Well, then I don't get to count that on my books and my reports. But it isn't like that. You know, at the end of the day, the strength of coming and having these numbers of saying, hey, we have served and put out 27.9 million to 11 recognized tribes. You know, that's the power. It's not the power of my backyard, right? But conceptually, sometimes that can take a minute to get used to get a true understanding. And I think like now I do have a true internal understanding with how this works and how this can benefit me, how it can benefit who I serve and help me to get to where I want to go. And then the last obstacle I will speak on is boards, because like I said, I was a chairperson of the board. Getting the message and the support to the board. That's another, because, you know, their role is a little bit different than what we're doing. And so helping them to understand and buy into, wow, this is a really good thing. This is going to, and where it can go and what the possibilities are. So I think sometimes there's a struggle there in getting that understanding and communication, sharing what the vision is. But otherwise, I really think that as a collaborative effort, there's nothing that we can't get past by working together. So happy to always be a part of this.
Thank you, Becky. And definitely that whole foundation of trust and working with your partners is what goes a long way and really creates to the success of these networks and coalitions. I couldn't agree more. We are running into a few more minutes, but I did want to touch, Lakota, if you did want to mention a few things before we do a few question and answer. If you have any pitfalls, advice.
No, I think hire somebody, you're creating jobs, so you can tell that story. And definitely just understand that it ebbs and flows. And what we did immediately after we did our sort of value statement was understanding and naming the biggest risk to this is that each of us are running our own organizations. So time is split amongst that. So if there is a big grant due, like the CDFI fund treasury grant, know that that's going to be a lull in time and just be responsive into that. And so it ebbs and flows as the capabilities of the participants, you know, have the time. But if you just name that and be like, yep, right now as a group, we understand it's going to be a slow time as far as coalition efforts go because we're all running our individual organizations. Like just being open and honest about that has helped us make it over some humps of slow times for the coalition's work. And that's just part of the process. So that's it.
Thank you. So a couple questions that have come up real quick. If anyone wants to add info or chime in, what is the geographic difference with the organizations of any of the coalitions? Maybe time and miles apart, and is that a barrier, and if so, how do you address that? Anyone wants to speak to that? I know you mentioned South Dakota, Joanna.
Yeah, big state. We go East River, West River. We alternate meetings so that people can participate, and we pay mileage. When we have funds available, we pay mileage, and that's been a big help, because even though some organizations can pay themselves, like we don't pay banks mileage and things like that, but even some of the TDHEs, it allows them to so they don't have to tap into those travel resources. So we often do travel resources and travel stipends to overcome the distances.
Anyone else? How do you manage that in your regions?
I was just going to add just a little bit to that, is just to say that virtual, of course, is a great benefit when there's distances. But there's something to be said about in-person meetings. So we've tried to, when we are supporting a conference or putting a training on together, we'll add maybe an extra evening or day onto that and get together and hold our meeting in conjunction with one of those events.
Yeah, and I was just going to echo exactly that. The nice thing about AT&I is we do have a core set of conferences about 3 times a year, and my organization also tries to do one about once a year, every 2 years or so, and just trying to hold that extra time and space, and creating our own events for just the network. I mean, that was a really big success we just had back in April. I think it was probably the first in-person event that a lot of us had attended in Portland. And yeah, that face value is really important, but certainly I know we wouldn't be meeting monthly without the Zoom jungle.
Absolutely. We do have another question. How are each collaborative entities dealing with the human capacity issue in finding qualified help? Huge challenge. Anyone want to touch on that?
We're doing not just the executive directors meeting once weekly. We also have the loan officers at our organization meeting once weekly in Zoom platform, and so that they can get to know each other. And it's just an open session of like an hour a week saying, what's on your plate? What are you doing? We're doing participation lending together also to train in each other. So like if I'm doing ag lending, I'll bring in somebody over in Wyoming and they can come sit next to my loan officer and underwrite together and learn the process, just so that we speed up that process. But in our new proposal for the EDA Build Back Better, we've listed that as part of the role of the CDC of doing this recruitment process, which is like getting into colleges, right? But hiring an individual to actually focus on recruiting to native CDFIs for the whole industry. So I think it's a great question. I don't think anybody's perfectly solved it, but we've just got to start at that level and begin recruiting all the little guys into the space and say it's a great place to work. So, and get benefits under control, because we all got to have a good healthy work environment to invite people into. So.
Anyone else want to touch on that before we close?
Yeah, just quickly, because, again, we're also an economic development organization, and we're completing our strategic plan on that side. And one of our pillars is to start creating this cohort of economic development professionals and start attracting people to the industry overall. So we haven't started that work yet. It's definitely kind of still in the dream phase, but we have some ideas on how we might want to start doing that in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, Fern, is to, I mean, obviously the dream person to hire is someone who has experience in your industry, but to look outside of industries, look outside of the lending industry for other local folks. And we've had, some of our members have had good luck with that as well. And also just to keep trying. Like I can tell you, like we had Lakota Funds hired a whole string of people, and well, this person didn't work out. This person didn't work out. And you just have to keep trying.
Absolutely. Actually, that can underscore everything that we're talking about, right? Keep trying, keep moving, keep doing. I want to thank all of you ladies for the fantastic work you do for Indian country, for your communities, your families, your organizations, and the real trailblazing work that all these coalitions and networks are doing across the country. I want to thank everybody for participating and listening to this important session. We have dropped the contact information for everyone in the chat. I'm sure everybody's willing and excited to talk with anyone having questions about forming your own coalitions and networks across Indian country. And now I'd like to shift over to our final closing plenary with our fearless leader, Chrystel Cornelius. Thanks again, everyone.
Good afternoon. We are closing out our 7th annual Native CDFI Capital Access Convening. And for our plenary closing remarks, we're actually going to do something a little bit different this year. Stephanie, can you bring up the PowerPoint, please? So this year, Oweesta recently hosted a training in Kauai, Hawaii, for our Native CDFI HUD Housing Counseling Network. Since we rarely get to visit Hawaii, Oweesta staff actually took some time to visit our Native CDFI partners on the island, specifically the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement and Hawaii Community Lending, who are both long-term partners of Oweesta, and conducted site visits on some of the projects that Oweesta has assisted in funding through our investment and grant initiatives. And I have to say, through the 3 days of training and site visits, this experience really, and I think I can speak on behalf of our Native CDFIs that were in attendance as well, the site visits, the ingenuity, when we look at Hawaii and their very unique infrastructure, just insofar as they're an island. When you look at real estate, when you look at development, you really have to be quite innovative in these models when resources are quite sparse. So as we conducted this site visit, our hearts were broken open by the tenacity and the pure perseverance of these organizations working their very best in different measures to uplift Hawaiian culture, to provide safe and affordable housing, to invigorate youth into reclaiming land. So with this, we are going to provide a brief slideshow, and we also did a short video interview with one of the user end clients of Oweesta. And I think what was really special here, especially for us and our staff at Oweesta, we work so much on a national level. And I think we're really unique in the fact that in working in these realms and having our deep relationships with our CDFIs, we're somewhat all over the board with, advocacy, with fundraising, but we rarely get the chance to meet with our Native CDFIs and have the opportunity to see how our money affects community, how our investments, and of course we get our quarterly reports and we see how many businesses were created. So all of our Native CDFIs, you're very aware of the Otis reporting, but to have the opportunity to really meet some of these individuals was just astounding. And I think it really reinvigorated not only our passion, although we have extreme passion in looking at, again, perseverance of culture and economic development that's really spun with Indigenous mindset. So with that, I would like to highlight our first group that we had the honor to visit, community, the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement. And CNHA, their acronym, really is an astounding organization. They're the longest standing Native CDFI in Hawaii, and they're a national intermediary lender. They have grown extraordinarily over the past couple years, and most recently have been awarded 2 $100 million awards to promote tourism and workforce development. So while we visited CNHA all through the morning, and they talked about their wide array of programs, which includes the CNHA Loan Fund, which helps propel consumer lending, small business lending, as well as homeownership opportunities. They also have a Hawaiian Trades Academy. And as you'll see on this picture, they offer CDL licensing. They're one of the only organizations in the state, number one, to do so, or number two, to have a simulator to be able to practice to get your license. So as you'll see on the slides here, both a lot of Oweesta staff, but we captured two of us. Florence Ledka, our chief financial officer, and myself were trying to drive a semi, and we didn't get it off the road, but it was a very fun experience. But the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement really has been an uplifting arm to the creation of other Native CDFIs within the islands of Hawaii, and a great partner in instituting not only workforce development. They have the Kialolo initiative, which helps entrepreneurs from 14 to 30 start, grow, and expand current future businesses. They've got a separate business program for adults, and they also have a pop-up makaki in which local vendors have an opportunity to sell their arts. I have to say, before we proceed further, I'm going to have to ask a great apology from our Native Hawaiian friends, in that I am doing my very best and will to pronunciate correctly, but I may not do very well as we move forward. But again, try to do that. The syllables were a little bit hard for me to cover there. So next, we had the opportunity through Hawaiian Community Lending, if we could go to the next slide, Stephanie, to be able to have an opportunity to meet one of their clients, and a client that Oweesta was able to assist through some grant funds. So here we're looking at Hawaii Home Solutions. And this organization is a Native-owned business established in 2014 to build affordable housing for Native Hawaiian and local families across the state. The founder and CEO, Kalolea Jardine, was born and raised in Oahu and Puna on the Hawaii island. Since founding his business, Kalolea has completed construction on more than 100 homes in Hawaii, targeting for sale opportunities for low and moderate income Native Hawaiians. Kalolea came to Hawaiian Community Lending in 2019 with a vision to get land back into the hands of Native Hawaiians communities, and to ensure that families would not have to move away from their homelands. He had an opportunity to start on this vision with the purchase of 3 fee-simple condo units in downtown Hilo, with the goal of making them available to Native Hawaiian families for home ownership. Hawaii Community Lending worked with Kalolea to complete the loan application, provided technical assistance along with third-party accountant to gather all necessary financial documentation, and issued a loan with grant funds from Oweesta made available in partnership with the Federal Home Loan Bank under the Fueling Native Economic Development Initiative. Kalolea was able to use these funds and purchase and complete rehab work. By the end of the project, the 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom condos were offered for sale to Native Hawaiian families enrolled with Hawaiian Community Assets, which is Hawaii Community Lending's parent corporation, for only $75,000 each. Now, in looking at this, most homes in Hawaii are going for over $1 million. So when you look at the Indigenous population, the Native Hawaiians, home ownership can very well seem unattainable. So being able to provide or help, or more so our local CDFIs, fund organizations such as this, as you see on the slides, we are changing the look of home ownership. These homes are beautiful. They have their own cistern systems, water and encasement systems, and are so affordable that now Native Hawaiians, and Hawaii is quite a bit different than the United States in that their homelands are still wrapped up in trust with the state of Hawaii. So we call them reservations, they call them homesteads. They have still been waiting for their land for over 150 years. So when we look at these innovations, hoping Hawaii and the state of Hawaii eventually breaks open this land to Indigenous members, in which way back within their history, in which they were won by a monarchy, was given to the native people of Hawaii, but been held by the state for hundreds of years. So we're so really excited to be able to see such innovative measures in home development and spurring home development efforts within Native Hawaii. The next organization that we had the honor to meet, and I think that this was one of the most poignant site visits maybe I've ever conducted in my professional career, but this organization is Dynamic Community Solutions. And what we're looking at here is an organization that was founded by pure necessity. We'll see in the next slide, not ready for that yet, Steph. The founder, whose name lovingly is Twinkle, she works quite a bit actually with state legislation, and the governor has lovingly said that she has the heart of Mother Teresa and the fists of Mike Tyson. But what we see within this community itself, Ho'oana o Waiani, a place and village of refuge, is a village of 250 people living unhoused in the leeward side of Oahu, and a majority of the residents are Native Hawaiians. It's an inspiring community first approach to houselessness. And what we really loved here is they don't call it homelessness, they call it houselessness, because when we had the opportunity to see this community, witness this community, and it was quite dynamic. With over 250 families, they essentially segregate per 25 family each, a mediator, not necessarily a mediator, I'm using the wrong word, a steward. So he looks over the 25 families, or she, and every Tuesday they come together with leaderships meetings to see what's going on larger in the community. Are there needs of children? Are there special needs? And it's very, very cooperative. So within this model, it's self-organized at nearly 0% to taxpayers, and it gets people what they need. So within the relationships that they've built with the state, with social services, they're able to offer or have individuals come to offer medical care, social services, school supplies, food security, and they're looking at permanent housing. And more importantly, it provides safety, healing, and a purpose through the community of Aloha. And one thing I thought was really beautiful with and having the opportunity to speak with Twinkle, and I can't remember the Hawaiian language for this, but essentially her main motto is responsibility wakes the spirit. So when we have families, single women, single men come and they're enveloped in this community, they host a food bank, they host and with all of these other social enterprises that not only encompasses the care of their community, they also help other nonprofit communities help houselessness. Everybody has their part, everyone has their role within this community, hence waking responsibility. So the building model that they are implementing is based on the traditional Native Hawaiian kaluhe, which is village, whereby housing for the project will consist of tiny home clusters with communal areas for restrooms, growing food, cooking, and gathering together. So as we see within the slideshow, we were visiting the houseless camp in and of itself, but they had an opportunity to purchase over 20 acres about 5 miles away. And as we speak, they are building permanent housing for the houselessness village to be able to move and reinvigorate what their model looks like. So the project, again, is run by Dynamic Community Solutions, a Native Hawaiian controlled nonprofit organization that was created by families in the village and is supporting other houseless communities run by Native Hawaiians. Prior to 2020, Dynamic Community Solution raised grants and donations that made it possible, again, for them to purchase the 20-acre land parcel in February 2020. Since then, they've been able to raise funds of $1 million shortfall, and they will begin actively building and are actively building as we speak. And our next highlight, oh, we have more pictures. So here we showed you then the former slides, the houseless camp. But as we come up and we see the 20 acres, this is the first model home for a family. And what is so incredibly innovative as well is they're incorporating agriculture into this model. So they have a set aside, put away, and they are growing their own food for their community. to where they will never see anybody hungry again, and also planning on donating that food. So these pictures here highlight the land that they've been developing for over 2 years and model homes that they're hoping eventually within the next 2 years to move the entire houseless camp to this new location and offer permanent housing. And last but not least, we have the Aloha Aina Poi Company. And the Aloha Aina Poi Company is a Native Hawaiian controlled community-based social impact organization based in the Makawali Valley in the west side of Kauai. Aloha Aina Poi Company is a farmer-owned enterprise serviced on the Aina. Aina means earth in the Hawaiian language, based community enrichment, empowerment, and economic development. Their goal is to provide the highest quality kalo products in order to reinvigorate and support a thriving kalo farming complex in West Kauai. This business model is really innovative. So we're talking about the Aloha Aina Poi Company, which is the for-profit arm of this business model. But the founders of this enterprise are also heavily committed to community enrichment and empowerment work focused on West Kauai. So they have a sister organization, which is a nonprofit, Kamuno a Kiala, which shares a common vision and mission to rebuild a sustainable West Kauai for future generations. So the partnership between the Aloha Aina Poi Company and the sister organization, the Kumano A'ela, is focused heavily on engaging youth and in growing the next generation of farmers. So their projects include the Mala Waimea River Project, which is a community volunteer program, the Aloha Aina After School Program for middle and high school students, the IKE Outreach Program for kindergarten through 12th grade, and also the No Ka Mau Mentorship Program, which is for at-youth risk and adults. In May of 2020, the Aloha Aina Poi Company and the Kamano Ali Aya principal, Kaina Makua, came to Hawaii Community Lending for an opportunity to purchase land near their facilities that could be used for workforce housing. So what they're essentially looking to do, looking at the land base that are available for Native Hawaiians with their land being still locked up, this integrated model is hoping to build workforce development for future youth farmers so they'll always have a sustainable place to live, be tied to the land and culture, and have an income that can support their families. So Hawaii Community Lending worked with Kayana to complete a loan application, provided technical assistance to gather all necessary financial documentation, and negotiated a sale with the current landowner. They issued a $60,000 interest-only 10-year deferred principal loan with grant funds from Oweesta, made possible in partnership again by the Federal Home Loan Bank under the Fueling Native Economic Development Initiative. Kaina used the funds to make purchase and keep 1 acre of Kauai lands into Native hands. So with this, we have a short video that highlighted our site visit within the Aloha Aina Poi Company, which we would like to present now.
Hello and good afternoon. We are so honored to be talking today to one of the founders of the Aloha Aina Poi Company. So we're just going to have a short conversation about this miraculous business model that not only incorporates culture, food, elders, teaching, and self-sustainability with housing. Can you just tell us a little bit of the spirit of why it was founded and the importance of reclaiming back land, housing, and creating a model that builds up youth, builds up enterprise, but also respects culture in ways that we don't normally see within one structure?
Yeah. You know, the intent of our whole outlook on what we was trying to build is really to just allow the next generation to have options. And we've luckily found that everything you've mentioned can fall within options. It can be options for everybody. And you know, like I've mentioned today, some of the things that you can't buy or get back is time. And how do we take advantage of the fact that we cannot buy time? But how do we also make ready for the next generation to take over what we're trying to build? Because everything that we're building is centered around great human beings. Yeah. And because we all great human beings. And so for us, I think when you bring good people in, you're always going to end up with what you was looking for. Yeah. And whether that be you, the farmer, whether you're the photographer, the videographer, you can be the office lady, but everybody together, like on a canoe, can serve for one purpose. And I think if we can hone in on what that purpose is as a unit, our canoe, metaphorically, will sail, you know, efficiently and fast.
And what's your greatest challenge? What do you need the most? Additional partnerships, additional understanding, outreach? Nothing. It could be very well just slowly building. What does sustainability or growth look like in this model to you? You said you started 15 children, now you have 100. You're competing nationally. You're growing food. You're agriculturally, organic farming in ways that are traditional for years. So sometimes in Western society, it's more, and sometimes we just have to know what is enough. So when you look at that, it's more children and driving next generations to teach farmers and reclaim the land and culture and pride. It's not even reclaim because we always have that.
Right.
I probably said that in there.
So the need, I mean, always gonna have one monetary need.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie.
Yep.
That is like number one in the world that we live in. And I will be honest, the funding that we've had is really minimal to what we are not worth, but what we need to be truly to truly take off. And I could spit out numbers if that would be comfortable, but we know we run on a skeleton crew. There's only a couple of us that run this whole operation, and it's every day. Sundays we working, Saturday we work. And if we were to get sufficient funding for 10 solid workers, full time, the things we could do in 5 years, from what you've seen today, you just times that by 100. And that's what we can do. And so if there is a ask or a need, I always gonna come with monetary funding, which is rare for us to ask.
It is.
You know, coming from an indigenous mindset,
Right.
we're not always quick to ask for the buck, because we'd rather show you what we're worth and you buy in.
And the resourcefulness and the ingenuity.
And everything happens after that. It's a
Yeah.
trickle effect.
Well, I want to say you've touched us, you've touched our native CDFIs, our hearts, the possibility, the passion, and more so just the groundedness of starting with people and respecting land and elders. And that builds up into a business model that's sustainable. We need millions of more people like you in the world. And thank you, Chi Miigwech, for everything you do.
Mahalo to you for coming out.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, that was wonderful. I see that we had a little bit of technological difficulties, but I think we got the gist of the model and the wonderful spirit of the 3 local farmers and the principal, Kayana, that runs the organization. So I would like to close out our panel today. I want to thank all of our Native CDFIs in attendance, our grantors, our investors, our constant believers, those of you that have joined maybe for the first time. I hope that you had a wonderful experience. I hope that we were able to provide a platform that was deep in learning, networking, and engaging with each other. We're very excited next year for our 8th annual Native CDFI Capital Access Convening. We will be hosting in Juneau, Alaska. So we're looking forward to seeing all of you in Juneau, Alaska next year. And again, to our sponsors, thank you so very much to the Northwest Area Foundation and Bank of America for generously sponsoring our event. We could not have done this without you. And in closing, and as traditional with Oweesta, we are going to close out our panel, close out our session, close out our wonderful 3 days of training with an honor song and a drum song. So again, on behalf of Oweesta staff, our board of directors, and all of our Native CDFIs, thank you so much for coming, joining, participating. You are what makes this great. We had wonderful sessions. We all engaged. So we are nothing without each other. And metaphorically, I think I'll use, if we're all on the same canoe, we can go great places. So with that, Chi Miigwech for your attendance. And we really look forward to seeing you next year.